I knelt laughing, plastic ring trembling, until Alex whispered yes. The city blurred, cheers rose, and his hopeful grip burned my palms, because in that second, my joke became his forever, and I shattered us completely. If you like this love story, then press like button and tell in comments where from you watching this love story. For more emotional and romantic love stories, press subscribe button. Thanks. Alex and I learned each other in pieces. Not the dramatic kind, no lightning strike moments, no instant sparks, but the slow, quiet kind that seeped into everyday life until it became impossible to remember who I was before him. We met in college on a rainy afternoon, both hiding in the campus library from a storm that felt too heavy for October. He offered me half his umbrella when the rain softened, and I remember thinking how unnecessary that was. We were already soaked. But I took it anyway. That was how it began. With small gestures that meant nothing on the surface and everything underneath. We became each other's constants without ever saying so. When my first serious relationship collapsed under the weight of cheating and excuses, Alex didn't offer advice. He just sat with me on the dorm steps, holding 2 paper cups of coffee that tasted like regret and burnt milk. When his heart broke a year later, quietly, painfully, from someone who left without a goodbye, I stayed up with him until dawn, listening to the same song loop on his laptop while he stared at the wall like it had answers. We didn't talk about feelings. We didn't need to. That's what I told myself. Somewhere along the way, Alex stopped being my friend and became my safe place. The person I texted when something went wrong, and when something went right. The first name I looked for in a crowded room. The voice I heard even when my phone was silent. He knew how I took my coffee. 1 sugar, too much milk, stirred exactly 3 times. I knew when his smiles were fake, the left corner of his mouth lifted half a second too late, his eyes staying distant like they were listening to a different conversation. When that happened, I'd change the subject. He'd relax. We'd move on. Every night, without planning it, we ended up texting. Sometimes it was about nothing, memes, bad movies, people we pretended not to judge. Sometimes it was heavier, confessions sent at 2 a.m., words that only came out when the world was quiet enough not to interrupt. We never said goodnight. We just stopped typing when sleep won. Silence felt wrong without him. Everyone else noticed before we did. Or maybe before we admitted it. You two are basically married, someone would say at a party, watching us move around each other with practiced ease. Just date already. Alex and I would laugh at the exact same moment, like it was rehearsed. Don't ruin a good thing, we'd say, in sync. I believed that. I clung to it. Because just friends was safe. It had rules. It had lines we promised never to cross. And crossing them meant risk, of loss, of change, of waking up one day without him in my life at all. So we stayed in the space between. But that space wasn't empty. It was full of moments that lingered longer than they should have. Like the night the campus lost power during a storm, and we lit candles in my apartment, shadows dancing on the walls like unfinished thoughts. We sat on the floor, knees touching, talking about nothing important. When thunder cracked overhead, Alex reached for my hand without thinking. Neither of us let go. Or the afternoon he painted in my tiny kitchen, canvases spread everywhere, music low. I watched him work, brush moving with quiet confidence, and wondered what it would be like to be seen the way he saw the world, soft edges, hidden light. When he caught me staring, he smiled and asked if there was something on his face. I said no. I lied. Distance became a language we both spoke fluently. There were people we dated, briefly, politely. Relationships that faded without drama because they were never the main story. I would mention a date casually, watching Alex's reaction like it didn't matter. He'd nod, ask a neutral question, then grow unusually quiet. He did the same to me. We pretended not to notice. We never touched in ways that couldn't be explained. Hugs lingered but ended first. Hands brushed, then retreated. If a moment grew too heavy, one of us would joke, breaking the tension like glass underfoot. Still, something ached. A good thing isn't supposed to hurt when someone walks into a room. But every time Alex appeared, laughing, familiar, entirely himself, something tightened in my chest. Relief, warmth, fear. All tangled together. One evening, autumn folding into winter, we sat on a park bench wrapped in shared silence. Leaves skittered across the pavement, dry and loud. Alex stared ahead, hands shoved into his coat pockets. "Do you ever think," he said slowly, "that some lines exist because we're afraid of what happens if we erase them?" I laughed too quickly. "You sound like a philosophy major." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just wondering," he said. I wanted to tell him the truth then. That I thought about it constantly. That erasing that line terrified me because I already knew what was on the other side, and I wasn't sure I could survive losing it. Instead, I shrugged. Some things are better left alone. Alex nodded, like he agreed. Like it didn't hurt. Later that night, I found a folded piece of paper tucked into my bag. A sketch he'd done earlier, two figures standing close, almost touching, separated by a thin, deliberate line. No faces. Just distance. I kept it. I told myself it meant nothing. But lies have a way of collecting interest. And the longer you live inside them, the more they demand in return. That night, as rain tapped softly against my window, my phone buzzed with a message from Alex. "You still awake?" I stared at the screen, heart beating too fast for a simple question. "Always," I typed back. The three dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. And in that pause, heavy, waiting, I felt it clearly for the first time. The line we never crossed wasn't protecting us. It was slowly pulling us apart. The rooftop was alive in the careless way only nights like that can be. Music pulsed through cheap speakers, vibrating the concrete beneath our feet. Laughter spilled over itself, loud and unfiltered, carried by warm air and half-empty drinks. The city stretched around us, windows glowing, traffic humming below, like it was watching but pretending not to care. String lights were draped along the railings, soft gold against the darkening sky, turning the rooftop into something almost magical. Almost. Alex stood beside me, close enough that I could feel his warmth without touching him. He was relaxed, jacket tossed over a chair, sleeves rolled up like he belonged anywhere he stood. Every now and then, our shoulders brushed. Familiar. Unremarkable. Dangerous. Someone shouted over the music, "You two are basically an old married couple already." A cheer followed. Whistles. Someone clinked their glass against mine. Seriously, another friend laughed, "Just get married already." I rolled my eyes, smiling automatically. Alex smirked too, the kind he always wore when people teased us, amused, confident, safe. That smirk told me everything was under control. That nothing would change. Then someone pressed something into my hand. I looked down. A plastic ring. Cheap. Bright. Probably from a vending machine downstairs. "Do it," they chanted. "Propose." The word bounced around the rooftop, light and ridiculous. Propose. As if it couldn't carry weight. As if it was just another joke to toss into the night and forget by morning. I laughed. Loudly. Too loudly. Alex raised an eyebrow, already entertained. Expecting performance. Expecting sarcasm. And maybe, if I'm honest, I wanted to prove something. To myself. To everyone. That this was harmless. That we were untouchable. That the line between us was solid and unbreakable. So I stepped forward. The music seemed to dip, not because it actually did, but because my pulse suddenly filled my ears. The city lights blurred slightly, like my vision had softened around the edges. People gathered closer, phones lifting, screens glowing. I dropped to one knee. The concrete was cold through my jeans. I remember that stupid detail, because my brain was still treating this like a game, cataloguing sensations without understanding their meaning. Alex laughed. A short, surprised sound. "You're ridiculous," he said. I grinned up at him, holding out the plastic ring like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Alex," I said, drawing it out theatrically, "will you marry me?" The words floated between us, dressed up in exaggeration, coated in humor. I expected applause. Groans. Someone yelling about time. Laughter exploded across the rooftop. Everyone except Alex. His smile vanished. Not slowly. Not dramatically. It just stopped. Like a light switched off behind his eyes. The crowd blurred at the edges of my vision. I stood there, still kneeling, waiting for the punchline. Waiting for him to laugh, to kick my shoulder, to say something clever that would end this cleanly. He didn't. Alex stared at me like he was seeing something he'd been afraid to look at for a long time. The music felt too loud. Then too quiet. The wind picked up, tugging gently at his hair, at the edges of my jacket. Somewhere behind us, someone whispered, "Oh my God." Alex swallowed. The seconds stretched. 1, 2, 3. I started to stand. Panic flared, sharp and sudden. This had gone wrong. I'd pushed too far. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, to pull us back. Then Alex spoke. Yes. It was quiet. Almost lost to the wind. I froze. The laughter died instantly, like someone had pulled the plug on the night. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Phones lowered, then rose again, uncertain. Alex stepped closer. His hands trembled as he took mine, still holding the stupid ring, and closed my fingers around it like he was afraid I'd drop it. Or disappear. Yes, he repeated, louder now. Clear. Certain. There was no smile on his face. Just truth. Something inside me cracked. The cheer that followed felt delayed, confused. People clapped, shouted, laughed again, assuming this was still part of the joke. Someone yelled, finally. Another whistled. Phones recorded, lights blinking like this moment was something to be proud of. Alex squeezed my hands tighter. I felt it then, the weight of it. Not the ring. His grip. The way his thumb brushed my knuckles, grounding himself. Grounding us. He leaned down, close enough that only I could hear him. You don't have to be scared, he whispered. My stomach dropped. Scared. That was the word that told me everything. I stood up slowly, still holding his hands. From the outside, it probably looked perfect. Romantic. A fairytale moment wrapped in city lights and applause. Inside, I was unraveling. Because Alex wasn't playing. This wasn't impulse. Or embarrassment. Or social pressure. This was hope. Raw. Undeniable. Terrifying. I searched his face for any sign of doubt, of humor, of escape. There was none. His eyes shone, not with tears, not yet, but with something fragile and brave. Like he'd just stepped off a ledge and was waiting to see if he'd fall. Someone shoved a drink into my free hand. Speech, they demanded. I laughed again, the sound brittle in my own ears. I said something vague. Something safe. Words that meant nothing and everything at once. The crowd accepted it. They always do. Alex didn't let go of me for the rest of the night. Every time someone pulled him away to congratulate him, he'd glance back, checking that I was still there. When the music swelled again, he leaned in to talk close to my ear, his breath warm, familiar. Intimate in a way it had never been allowed to be before. "You okay?" he asked softly, like he already knew the answer. "Yeah," I lied. "I'm good." The city seemed brighter now, lights sharper, sounds clearer. Or maybe that was just panic heightening everything. Later, when the party thinned and the air cooled, Alex found me at the edge of the rooftop, staring out at the skyline. He stood beside me, not touching, respecting a distance he'd never needed before. "I know it started as a joke," he said carefully. "But, if you want to talk about it." I shook my head too quickly. "Not tonight." He nodded. He always did. Patient. Trusting. Before he left, he pressed something into my palm. I looked down. The plastic ring. "Keep it," he said. "Until we figure things out." Figure things out. After he walked away, the rooftop felt empty, even with people still laughing behind me. I turned the ring over in my fingers, its cheap surface catching the glow of the city lights, transforming into something heavier than it had any right to be. Below, traffic moved steadily. Life continued. Above me, clouds drifted in, slowly covering the stars. And for the first time, I understood the truth I'd been avoiding for years. I hadn't crossed the line by kneeling. I'd crossed it the moment I let him believe. The wind picked up again, colder now, and I closed my fist around the ring, because I already knew this joke had changed everything. And there was no way back. After that night, everything felt different, but not in the way people mean when they talk about love. Not lighter. Not brighter. Heavier. Alex didn't change all at once. It was subtle, almost careful, like he was afraid sudden movement might break something fragile between us. He walked closer now. Not touching, but near enough that the space we once relied on no longer existed. His voice softened when he spoke to me, like every word was wrapped in intention. Like nothing he said was accidental anymore. And that terrified me. The first message came the next morning. "Good morning, Red Heart Hash." A red heart. Simple. Small. But it landed in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. I stared at my phone longer than I should have. My thumb hovered, frozen between honesty and cowardice. In the end, I replied with a smiley face. Neutral. Safe. Incomplete. Alex responded instantly. "I was thinking we could grab breakfast later. That place you like near campus. The one sugar, too much milk cafe. The one that belonged to us before everything had names." I typed sure before I could stop myself. That became the pattern. He started planning in quiet, hopeful ways. Nothing dramatic, just suggestions tucked into conversation. A restaurant he wanted me to try. A weekend trip he said would be nice for us. A concert months away, mentioned casually, like it was already assumed we'd still be standing side by then. Every plan felt like a question I didn't know how to answer. Every smile he gave me asked something I wasn't brave enough to say no to. Alex began looking at me differently too. Like he was memorizing my face. Like he was afraid time might steal details from him if he didn't pay attention. When I laughed, his eyes softened. When I went quiet, he noticed immediately. "You okay?" he'd ask. "Always okay. Always lying." I missed the ease we had before. The unspoken rules. The safety of knowing what we were not. Now, every moment felt like it could tip in one direction or another, and I was terrified of where I might fall. The silence between us changed shape. Before, silence had been comfortable. Shared. Full. Now it pressed down on me, dense and expectant. When Alex paused mid-sentence, I felt it like a held breath. When he waited for my reply, I felt the weight of his hope stretching toward me, patient and unguarded. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my phone resting face down beside me like an accusation. Messages from Alex waited there, sweet, careful, real. "Did you eat? I miss you today. I can't stop thinking about you." Each one tightened the knot in my chest. I wanted to scream the truth. To rip the bandage off and let it bleed. But every time I imagined his face, hope cracking into something wounded, I swallowed the words back down. How do you tell your best friend that the moment he believed in most was never real? I started creating distance without meaning to. I took longer to reply. Claimed I was busy when I wasn't. Let calls ring until they stopped. When we met in person, I stayed half a step back, like physical space could replace emotional honesty. Alex noticed. Of course he did. One afternoon, we met at the park where we used to sit for hours doing nothing. The trees were beginning to lose their leaves, gold and rust drifting down like small goodbyes. He brought coffee for both of us, mine exactly the way I liked it. I hated how much that still mattered. "You've been quiet lately," he said, sitting beside me. "Not too close. Not too far." "Just tired," I replied. He nodded, but his gaze stayed on me. Searching. Gentle. Devastating. "If I'm doing something wrong," he said slowly, "you can tell me." "You?" The words sat between us. I looked away, watching leaves skitter across the pavement, driven by a wind that didn't ask permission. "No," I said. "You're not." That was true. Which somehow made it worse. That night, he sent me a photo. A painting. I recognized his style instantly, soft edges, muted colors, emotion hidden in small details. Two figures stood under a streetlight, close but not touching. Between them, shadows stretched longer than their bodies. "I couldn't sleep," he texted. This felt like us. My throat tightened. I didn't reply. I couldn't. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was loud. It echoed through the hours, through my thoughts, through the growing understanding that avoiding the truth didn't make it disappear. It just let it rot quietly. Days passed. Then more. Alex didn't stop trying. He never pushed, but he never pulled away either. He kept showing up, steady and hopeful, like love was something you nurtured with patience and time. And maybe for him, it was. For me, it was a clock ticking louder every day. One evening, rain started unexpectedly, heavy and sudden. I was caught outside, no umbrella, watching the sky split open. My phone buzzed. "Where are you?" I told him. 10 minutes later, Alex appeared, hair damp, jacket already soaked, holding his umbrella out over me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You could have waited inside," I said. He smiled. "Didn't want you to get sick." We stood there, rain pounding around us, the world narrowed to the circle of shelter he held. Water dripped from his lashes. His breath fogged the cool air. For a moment, everything felt dangerously close to something real. I've been thinking, he said quietly. Maybe we should slow down a bit. If you're overwhelmed. I looked at him, startled. He was giving me an out. And I hated myself for wanting to take it. That might be good, I said. The relief on his face was instant and heartbreaking. He nodded, stepping back, the umbrella shifting so rain splashed onto my shoulder. Okay, he said. Whatever you need. That night, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was the painting he'd shown me. Folded carefully. On the back, written in his familiar handwriting. I don't need answers yet. I just don't want to lose you. I sat on the floor for a long time, the rain tapping against the window like a countdown. The painting lay in my lap, the space between the figures suddenly unbearable to look at. I realized then that silence wasn't protecting either of us. It was hurting him. And it was hollowing me out. I folded the painting again, carefully, like it might break if I wasn't gentle enough. My phone buzzed once more. Good night, Alex texted. No heart this time. Just distance. I typed his name. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Outside, the rain finally began to slow. Inside, I knew the truth I could no longer outrun. Silence was becoming a decision. And soon, it would choose for us. I chose a quiet place to end the lie. Not the rooftop. Not the cafe. Not anywhere that carried memories we could hide behind. I chose the old art studio near campus, the one Alex used when he needed space to breathe. Tall windows. White walls stained with color. The smell of paint and dust and unfinished things. It felt appropriate. Alex arrived early. He always did. Sitting on a wooden stool, sketchbook resting on his knee, pencil moving but not really drawing. When he looked up and saw me, his face softened instinctively, then paused, like he sensed the weight I was carrying. You sounded serious, he said gently. I nodded. My mouth was already dry. The afternoon light spilled in through the windows, pale and unforgiving. Dust floated between us like something suspended, waiting to fall. I stood near the door for a moment too long, fingers twisting together, heart beating in my throat. I can't do this anymore, I said finally. Alex straightened, the pencil stilling in his hand. Do what? Lie. Pretend. Let him believe. I walked closer, every step feeling like I was walking into something irreversible. My reflection caught in the window, someone older than I remembered, eyes heavy with guilt. It was just a joke, I whispered. The words sounded smaller than they had in my head. Fragile. Cowardly. For a moment, Alex didn't react at all. No anger. No shock. No raised voice. Just a slow inhale. Then he nodded. Once. Twice. Like he was bracing himself against a truth he'd been holding at arm's length for weeks. I figured, he said quietly. That hurt more than if he'd yelled. I felt something twist sharply in my chest. You did? He closed his sketchbook and set it aside, carefully, like the movement required respect. When he looked at me again, his eyes were steady, but tired. So deeply tired. I hoped I was wrong, he admitted. But yeah. I knew. The room felt suddenly smaller. The walls closer. The air heavier. I'm sorry, I said quickly. Too quickly. I never meant to hurt you. Everyone was laughing, and it felt harmless, Anne. I know, he interrupted softly. He stood up, not approaching, not retreating. Just standing there, equal distance between us, like he was choosing restraint over instinct. I know you didn't plan it, he continued. That's kind of the problem. My throat burned. Alex. I think, he said, cutting in again, voice low and careful, I've been serious for a long time. The words settled into the space between us, heavy and undeniable. I stared at him, at the way his shoulders were slightly tense, like he was holding himself together by will alone. I saw it all then, the patience, the planning, the way he'd been gentle when he could have demanded clarity. He hadn't fallen suddenly. He'd been falling quietly for years. I didn't expect you to feel the same, he went on. I just thought maybe the joke meant you were ready to admit something too. Something inside me cracked open. Because that was the part one hadn't wanted to examine. The part I'd buried under excuses and timing and fear. Maybe, I said, barely audible, that's why I did it. Alex's breath caught. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. I took another step closer. I've been avoiding this conversation because I was afraid of what it would cost. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of ruining what we had. He let out a soft, humorless laugh. And now? And now I realize we already ruined it, I said. Just, slowly. Alex looked away, toward one of the unfinished paintings leaning against the wall. It was new. I hadn't seen it before. Two figures again, this time closer, faces turned toward each other, but blurred. Unclear. Unfinished. I never needed promises, he said. I just needed honesty. I know, I whispered. And I didn't give you that. He turned back to me then. Not angry. Not pleading. Just honest. Tell me something, he said. Right now? No jokes. No fear. My heart pounded. Okay. Did any part of you mean it? The question hung there, sharp and bare. I closed my eyes. Images rushed in, the way he knew my coffee order, the way silence felt wrong without him, the ache I pretended not to feel when he walked into a room. When I opened my eyes again, my vision blurred. Yes, I said. Alex's expression shifted, not relief, not joy. Just understanding. And that, he said quietly, is what scares you. I nodded. We stood there, inches apart, not touching. Intimacy humming under the surface, held back by restraint and regret. The kind of closeness that hurt because it wasn't allowed to go anywhere. I don't want to force you into something you're not ready for, Alex said. But I can't pretend anymore either. I wouldn't ask you to, I replied. I just don't know what comes next. He picked up the sketchbook again, holding it to his chest like armor. Neither do I. Outside, clouds gathered, dimming the light. The room slowly shifted from bright to grey, like the day itself was deciding to step back and let us sit with what we'd said. I think we need space, he added after a moment. Not because I don't care. But because I care too much to keep bleeding quietly. The words cut cleanly. I nodded, because arguing would only make it harder. How much space? Alex hesitated. Enough to figure out if what you felt was fear, or love. He moved past me toward the door. As he reached it, he paused. For what it's worth, he said without turning around, I don't regret believing you. Even if it was a joke. Then he left. The door clicked shut softly, final in its gentleness. I stood alone in the studio, surrounded by unfinished art and unspoken truths. The painting of the blurred figures stared back at me, their almost touch unbearable now that I understood what it represented. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. I realized then what the real problem had been all along. I hadn't been afraid of loving Alex. I'd been afraid of admitting that I already did. And as the first drops of rain hit the window, I knew one thing with aching certainty. Some truths don't disappear once spoken. They wait for what you choose next. We stopped talking the way people stop breathing in cold water, suddenly, shockingly, and with a pain that burns all the way down. No goodnight texts. No shared coffee orders typed without thinking. No Alex. At first, I kept reaching for my phone out of habit. My fingers still knew the path to his name. Every night around midnight, my body remembered him before my mind did. I'd open my messages, stare at the empty space where his words used to live, then close the app like I'd touched something too hot. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was loud. It rang in my ears when I woke up. It sat beside me while I ate alone. It followed me through crowded streets and quiet rooms alike, reminding me that absence isn't emptiness, it's presence without form. I tried to tell myself this was necessary. That space was healthy. That distance would dull the ache. It didn't. It sharpened it. The cafe near campus still knew my order. The barista smiled and asked, "Just one today," like she was asking about the weather. I nodded, forcing a smile, carrying my single cup to a table that used to fit two. The chair across from me stayed empty, sunlight spilling over it like it didn't know any better. I couldn't sit there long. Everywhere I went, Alex was already there in memory. In the park where leaves still fell, now piling up like unsent letters. On the bench where we once shared headphones, now occupied by strangers who didn't know how fragile quiet could be. At night, rain came often. Soft at first. Then heavier. It tapped against my window like a question I refused to answer. I lay awake listening, imagining him on the other side of town, maybe painting, maybe staring at his phone the same way I was. Maybe not. That thought hurt the most. I found his painting again, the one he'd slipped under my door. I tucked it away in a drawer, pretending out of sight meant out of mind. It didn't. I unfolded it carefully, like you would something breakable. The paper was creased where I'd held it too tightly once. Two figures. Still not touching. The space between them felt wider now. I wondered if he was painting again. If he was filling canvases with versions of me I no longer had the right to see. The idea of becoming someone he used to paint instead of someone he talked to made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. Days passed. Then more. Friends noticed. "Have you talked to Alex? Did you guys fight? You okay?" I lied efficiently. "Just busy. Timing stuff. We're fine." We weren't. I missed him in the smallest, cruelest ways. When something funny happened and my first instinct was to tell him. When I saw a movie trailer he would have loved. When my coffee tasted wrong and there was no one to complain to who already understood. Love, I learned, wasn't always fireworks or grand confessions. Sometimes it was knowing exactly who would care. One afternoon, I found an envelope taped to my door. My heart stuttered. I stood there for a full minute before touching it, afraid of hope, afraid of disappointment. The handwriting wasn't his. Just my name, written carefully. Inside was a simple flyer. An art show. Local artists. Alex's name was listed. My breath caught. I didn't know if it was an invitation or an accident. I didn't know if going would be crossing a line or honoring something we hadn't finished. I went anyway. The gallery was bright and white and too clean for how messy I felt inside. People moved quietly, murmuring appreciation, glasses of wine in hand. Paintings lined the walls, color, emotion, fragments of other people's truths. Then I saw his work. I knew it immediately. His style always carried something unfinished, like he painted what he couldn't say out loud. The first painting showed a rooftop. String lights. Two shadows overlapping but not quite merging. The second was rain on glass, distorted city lights bleeding together. The third stopped me completely. It was us. Not our faces. He never painted faces clearly when emotions were involved, but the posture was unmistakable. One figure leaning in, the other turning slightly away. Between them, a thin crack ran down the canvas, subtle but impossible to ignore. A fracture. I didn't realize I was crying until my vision blurred. He didn't name that one, a voice said beside me. I turned. Alex. He looked different. Not worse. Just quieter. Like someone who had learned how to carry something heavy without showing it. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. I didn't know if you'd come, he added. I didn't know if I should, I admitted. Silence fell between us again, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of everything we hadn't said. I missed you, I said before I could stop myself. Alex swallowed. I missed you too. We stood there, surrounded by art and witnesses, not touching. Distance felt intentional now. Protective. I thought losing you would hurt less than loving you, I confessed softly. I was wrong. His gaze softened, pain and warmth tangled together. I didn't want to be someone you loved in secret. I know. The room felt too small. Too public. Too late and too soon at the same time. I don't know what happens next, I said. Alex nodded slowly. Neither do I. He looked back at the painting, the crack down the middle catching the light. But I don't want this to be the last thing we ever create. That wasn't a promise. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a possibility. As I left the gallery, night had settled in. The air was cool, the city humming softly around me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message. From Alex. Did you get home safe? I stared at the screen, heart racing, not from fear this time, but from something fragile and alive. Outside, clouds parted just enough for the moon to show. I typed back. Yes. One word. Nothing more. But it was a beginning. And as I slipped my phone away, I understood something with quiet clarity. Losing him had felt worse than loving him. Because love, at least, meant he was still there. And maybe he wasn't completely gone yet. Weeks passed, but time didn't heal anything the way people promised it would. It only clarified. The silence between Alex and me softened, not gone, not fixed, but reshaped into something careful. We spoke again, slowly, like relearning a language we once knew fluently. Messages without hearts. Conversations without assumptions. Check-ins that asked how are you and meant it. Still, something unfinished pulled at me every day. I kept thinking about that rooftop. The place where everything cracked open. The place where I'd laughed while he believed. I started dreaming about it, string lights swaying, the city humming below, the wind brushing against my skin like a reminder. In every dream, I was kneeling again, but this time my mouth wouldn't open. I'd wake up with my heart racing, hands clenched, knowing the truth I could no longer outrun. I loved him. Not quietly. Not safely. Not as a joke. The realization didn't arrive like a thunderbolt. It settled into me slowly, with certainty. I loved him in the way I missed him when he was gone. In the way his absence hurt more than his presence ever could. In the way my future felt unfinished without his name written somewhere in it. So I bought a ring. Not flashy. Not oversized. Just simple and real, something that felt like us. I held it in my palm afterwards, staring at the small circle of metal, realizing how much weight honesty carried. I asked Alex to meet me. I didn't explain why. Same place, I said. He hesitated for a second. The rooftop? Yes. Another pause. Longer this time. Okay, he replied. That night, the city looked softer than I remembered. The sky was clear, stars faint but present, like they'd decided to show up quietly. The string lights were still there, someone had fixed them since the last time, replacing broken bulbs with warm new ones. I arrived early. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every doubt I'd ever had crowded my chest at once. What if I was too late? What if I was doing this out of guilt instead of love? What if I hurt him again? But beneath all that noise was something steady. Certainty. Alex stepped onto the rooftop a few minutes later. He looked up, taking it in, recognition flickering across his face. Not pain, memory. He walked toward me slowly, cautious but open, like someone who'd learned to protect himself without closing off completely. You okay? He asked, the same question he'd always asked. I nodded. I am now. The wind moved gently between us. The city buzzed below, unaware of how important this moment felt above it. I brought you here, I said, because I needed to face the place where I lied to you. Alex's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't look away. I needed to fix something, I continued. Not with words. With truth. I reached into my pocket. His eyes widened, not with expectation, but with disbelief. I stepped forward, heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Then I knelt. The concrete felt cold again, but this time I noticed everything, the weight of the ring in my hand, the tremor in my fingers, the way Alex's breath caught sharply in his chest. Alex, I said, voice unsteady but clear, the first time I did this, I was hiding behind laughter. I was afraid of losing you. Afraid of admitting what I felt. Tears gathered in his eyes, shining under the lights. I know I hurt you, I went on. I know belief is fragile, and I broke yours. But I need you to hear this, not as a joke, not as a promise I haven't thought through. I opened the box. This time, I whispered, I'm not joking. The city seemed to hold its breath. I love you. I've loved you longer than I was brave enough to admit. And I don't want a future where I keep choosing safety over you. I want the risk. I want the truth. I want us, honestly, openly, without pretending. Alex covered his mouth with one hand, tears spilling freely now. Will you marry me? I asked. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he laughed, a small, broken sound that turned into a sob. He dropped to his knees in front of me instead, hands gripping mine like he was grounding himself in the moment. Yes, he said, voice shaking. Yes. I thought I'd already lost you. I slipped the ring onto his finger, my own tears finally falling, blurring everything into light and color and relief. When we stood, he pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly, like he was afraid the universe might change its mind. I rested my forehead against his, breathing him in, feeling the steadiness of his heartbeat. This time, the cheers were quiet, just the city, the wind, the truth settling into place. I mean it, I said softly. I know, Alex replied, smiling through tears. I can feel the difference. We stayed there for a long time, saying nothing, watching the lights below, letting the weight of what we'd chosen sink in. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a question mark. It felt like a beginning. And as the night deepened around us, I understood something I wished I'd known sooner. Love isn't ruined by honesty. It's ruined by fear. This time, I chose differently.